What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing my first 2020 AFL tips and predictions video. I'm going to be doing, obviously, round 1 now for this, but obviously there's a couple of, complications going around with round 1 at the moment. For those of you who didn't know, the AFL look like they might actually be maybe cancelling round 1 and potentially delaying the AFL season till, further notice due to the coronavirus and all that type of stuff. So there is, I guess, a lot of people are kind of hoping that it still goes on. Some people are having their doubts and all of that type of stuff. I mean, I'm kind of hoping that it does actually eventually go on. And yeah, I know it won't exactly be the same without a crowd, but I just really miss the footy. And yeah, I think it would be still pretty cool to potentially see it go on. And I think all the players are ready and a lot of players are willing to take that risk. But they were supposed to come out for like the last couple days to announce that they would be potentially continuing it, but at the time of making this video it is still a go ahead. So I don't know, hopefully when this video actually does come out they haven't cancelled it, but again, I'm not exactly too sure. There is still a lot of speculation, all that type of stuff going. And again, before I get into the tips and predictions, I'd just like to thank you guys so much for joining in last year. For those of you who for those of you who did watch my tips and predictions videos, obviously I think I've improved on them quite a bit throughout this year, rather than it just being a boring image with my voice on it. It's now going to have gameplay, music, all that type of stuff, more pictures and all of that, but yeah, again, so without further ado, let's get straight into it. And again, thank you guys for watching last year's, and I really appreciate it if you guys did. And yes, without further ado, here it is. We're going to be starting off with round 1, which is going to be Richmond versus Carlton on what's supposed to be Thursday night footy, but again, we don't really know. I'm still hoping it does continue. It's going to be very weird to potentially see, again, the reigning premiers are going to be coming in versus Carlton, a team that a lot of people are expecting quite a bit of improvement out throughout the 2020 AFL season. I think, one thing I also forgot to mention on, I think there could be a lot of, surprises in the first round, because I feel like some teams are going to be pretty unready due to the, coronavirus and all that type of stuff. And a lot of teams' preparations are going to be a little bit mixed up, but I don't think that's going to be the case for Richmond. I think, them being the favourites, I think they're still most likely going to win this game, and they should potentially win it comfortably. Usually they do win against, Carlton by at least 30 or so points pretty much every single season. Again, I'm not too sure if it's going to be like that because the preparation, all that type of stuff. But again, I do expect Richmond to still top Carlton, although there has been a lot of injury concerns with Richmond recently, with players like Toby Nankervis, Camden McIntosh, Jack Graham, Jack Higgins, and now Basher Hooley all having their injury problems, right now, while Carlton do have obviously no Charlie Curnow and Eddie Betts. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see how this game potentially goes, although I do believe Richmond should still get the win against Carlton, this Thursday night. But yeah, moving on now, we actually got the Western Bulldogs versus Collingwood, and this is one of the games where I actually think there could be quite a bit of surprise here. But a lot of people expect both these teams to make the top 8, potentially both of them to maybe even make the top 4. It is going to be Friday night footy. I believe it's actually going to be at Marvel Stadium, and a lot of people are going to actually have Collingwood potentially winning this game. I think there could actually be a shock here. I honestly think that Western Bulldogs could potentially beat Collingwood. I do believe they have a pretty good record against them recently, and I honestly think they have quite a bit of a chance to potentially beat Collingwood. A lot of people saying these two teams have, arguably the two best midfields in the league. I even think that Western Bulldogs could potentially be topping that right now. I mean, just with their young and absolute beast of a midfield. They ended up improving their backline slightly as well, and then improved their forward line by, adding another key forward in Josh Bruce. So I think that is going to be a very interesting competition, especially for Friday night footy as well. And I think, because this is actually Western Bulldogs' home game, I think this does give them quite a bit of an advantage against Collingwood. And yeah, I think it's going to be, I think this could be the round of the week. I honestly think these two teams are probably, it's one of the few games where, two of the best teams are going to be versing each other. So I think it's going to be very interesting to potentially see how it goes. But yeah, I've actually got Western Bulldogs to potentially get an upset against Collingwood on Friday night footy. Now, moving on, we actually have Essendon versus Fremantle, which will be on Saturday, 1:45. It is expected to start. Again, even though I don't expect really too big of things from Essendon this year, I do honestly think they should still get the job done against Fremantle. I think, no matter what Nat 5 does say about Fremantle, and, they've got a really good young core and all of that type of stuff, and they're still, competing and trying to make the 8, no matter what he says, the losses they did have, were just, there's so many of them. Brad Hill, he's joined the Saints. Langdon joined Melbourne. Pretty much their 2 wingers and 2 of their best players. And then Hogan's still out, for quite a bit. No one exactly knows when he's potentially going to come back. They got the 3 new draftees who I do expect to potentially come in. I really don't expect big things from them. I mean, they really only have a couple of really good players in their list. Their back line's below average, their forward line's below average, and their midfield is not that great at all. I mean, they've got Nat 5, a couple other decent players here and there, just a bunch of young players as well, like Brayshaw, Chera, all those type of players are still trying to, get their spot within the team. So I think it's going to be extremely interesting to see potentially how this game does, I guess, eventually go. But, Essendon, they have it at home. I do believe it is at Marvel Stadium. I'm pretty sure you'd expect Essendon to really just get the job done against Fremantle. But yeah, because it's the first game, I think Fremantle are going to be strong for the first bit of the year. I mean, usually the bad teams always do at least decent at the start of the season because, they're still getting in there. They've got a lot of the young players are just kind of letting it all out, and then they start to get more tired throughout the end of the season. I mean, it happens with Gold Coast like every year. Somehow they've managed to win the first 3 or so games, or something like that. I do potentially think that Freo will give Essendon a decent amount of challenge, but I honestly think that Essendon could literally just blow them out if they really just put their full steam ahead, honestly. And yeah, I think that's how it will most likely potentially go. Now, moving on to Adelaide versus Sydney, which is actually, a Saturday game, 4:35. A lot of people have both these teams to be, potentially in the bottom 8 of this year. I honestly think both these teams will potentially finish through that 12 to 18th type of bracket. I think Adelaide should potentially be worse than Sydney throughout this season, but a lot of people are really writing Adelaide off and just going to have an absolutely terrible season. Myself included for a little bit, but then I kind of just switched the opinion and kind of looked at their list and I was like, hold on. They have so many absolute jets on their team. If this team does not, perform at least somewhat throughout the season, then it's a massive fail of the season. I know that there's a lot of belief that they are going to potentially try and rebuild, but if you look at their list, they still got quite a, decent amount of good players, so they shouldn't be trying to really rebuild too much. I think they should be in that 14th, 13th type of range, but again, they will probably fall down quite a bit, but there should still be a couple of teams that they do better than this season. And that's why I've actually got them beating Sydney at home. I do believe that, yes, a lot of people are writing them off. I don't necessarily know they have the better list than Sydney. I would presume Sydney probably have the better list, but it's at home, and it's, round 1. Adelaide still have a lot of very good players. I think this is kind of a statement round for them that they just need to come out and show everyone that they are still relatively a decent team, and yeah, they've still got quite a decent amount of players on there, so that's why I think, I think Adelaide will potentially get the win on this one. Now, moving on to Gold Coast versus Port Adelaide, another game where I think there could be an upset, although I will be tipping against it. A lot of people have Port Adelaide winning this game. Honestly, it's actually at Gold Coast home ground, which could be, I believe, one of their first home games for round 1 in quite a while, due to the fact that I don't believe they got it last season. I think they had renovation the season before, and I don't think they had it the season before that. I could be wrong, but yeah, it's at Metricon Stadium. Gold Coast still have a very, very young list, although they were playing very good throughout the Marsh Community Series, with a lot of their veterans actually stepping up. For example, new inclusions such as Brandon Alice and Greenwood actually playing, I guess pretty decent throughout as well. I'm not too sure about Greenwood. I'm pretty sure he played okay, but yeah, Alice was a massive factor in how they improved moving the ball. So I think, yeah, the Gold Coast are going to be a little bit better than what they were potentially last season, but I don't know if it's exactly going to be too much better. But yeah, again, Port Adelaide, although I think they are a top 8 chance this season, I think Port Adelaide still should get the job done against Gold Coast. That's just how I potentially see it, although I could see an upset, because Gold Coast usually for some reason start off really well. I honestly think there could be an upset where Gold Coast just come out and beat them by like 10 points, but honestly, I think Port Adelaide should get the job done. I don't really see too many scenarios where they don't get the job done. If they want to be a top 8 contending team, which, you know, they've been saying for many seasons, but I think this could be the season they do it with that nice young core now, then they do need to beat Gold Coast at home, you know, at their home stadium, and get a good start for the 2020 AFL season. Now, moving on to GWS versus Geelong. Again, this is another one where two of the best teams are going to be playing each other, although it is at GWS's home stadium, and even though quite a bit of people believe that Geelong will stay in a similar bracket to what they potentially were last season, I honestly think they should potentially fall a decent amount this season due to the fact that they literally just lost pretty much their best or second best player, one of their best young players, and they haven't really got exactly too much in return. I do expect them to fall down a tiny bit. Yes, they got Jack Stephen and that, but there are so many teams now that I think are going to come in and potentially do better than them, and I think, yeah, it's going to be a very interesting season for Geelong, and I'm not exactly too sure how they're going to go. But in contrast to that, we've actually got GWS, who are just coming off a grand final, you know, absolutely where they got belted pretty much by the Richmond Football Club, and it just wasn't a good sight from GWS. And yeah, again, GWS are coming back for that redemption season. A lot of their best players have now re-signed with the club, so it's going to be really interesting to see how they can potentially go. And they get round one against a pretty solid team in the Geelong Football Club at their home stadium. And yeah, you know, there are a couple factors on why I'm going to be tipping, but I will be tipping GWS to beat Geelong. Although, you know, I do see a decline from Geelong this season, and I do believe that GWS, with no injuries, should be around the same spot, if not better to what they were last season. I do expect GWS to still be able to beat Geelong at home stadium, and yeah, again, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that one goes as well. Now, moving on to North Melbourne versus St Kilda, we have one of the games where I'm really anticipating, as both of these teams are pretty much playing at home. It will be at Marvel Stadium, and although a lot of people do have somewhat hype for North, you know, there are a lot of North fans that think they might be good throughout the season. I'm not exactly thinking they're going to be great. I think they could still finish maybe top 13. I don't think they're really going to finish lower than that, but again, they could potentially. I mean, they just always fall in that bracket of like 16th to 10th at this point. They don't usually get higher than that for the past couple of seasons. While St Kilda, I'm extremely liking what they are going to be doing. I think they are primed to actually have a really decent season, and there is a couple of, you know, things that I really like about St Kilda is they don't have an actual like 100% star on their team. They have a lot of some of the best role players in the AFL, like Brad Hill, you know, those type of players, and now they're adding one of the best young key forwards there are in Max King, who I think should be able to come in and, you know, potentially play alright. I don't know if he's going to do that great in his first couple of games. It'll probably take him a season to kind of adjust to it, but again, I'm not exactly too sure. And yeah, I'm very, you know, excited and anticipating to see how he's potentially going to go against North Melbourne. But I do have St Kilda winning this game, and I think they will actually make a statement to the AFL. Whichever team wins this, I think will make quite a bit of a statement. St Kilda have already proven they can get in a bunch of really nice role players here and there. Like Dan Butler's was one of the best small forward role players in the league before a couple injuries hit. Brad Hill's one of the best, you know, wing type of role players in the league. There's so many players like that which are really good. Obviously, you know, Brad Hill is arguably one of the best role players in the AFL. His role is to create dash on the wing and also pretty much pinpoint it into a key forward on the run, and he does it so great, and it's kind of almost disrespectful a little bit by me to call him a bit of a role player, but I mean, yeah, but again, he's not exactly a star like maybe someone like Nat Fyfe or Dusty, but yeah, he does the job, and he's very good at it, and I think that if you chuck like a Nat Fyfe on this St Kilda team right now, they would literally be insane. They just need a star to come in with these type of players, but I think they're going to have a pretty good season and could potentially even make the 8, and yeah, I do have them beating North Melbourne in round 1. But now moving on, we got Hawthorn versus Brisbane, which is at the MCG. Now, Hawthorn versus Brisbane's always pretty interesting because Brisbane always kind of have the best of Hawthorn. Like, it's one of the teams that Hawthorn can't usually really crack. Them and Richmond are two of the hardest teams they usually can never exactly crack, and whether that's at home or in Brisbane or in Tasmania, Brisbane still usually do pretty well against Hawthorn, and I do expect them to that actually be a very similar case to potentially last time, where I do believe Brisbane will come out and, you know, pretty much beat Hawthorn at their home stadium. A lot of people have, or home ground. While a lot of people have beliefs that Hawthorn should potentially make the 8, and some people are saying Brisbane will potentially slide from the top 4, down. I think they could, because Brisbane just lost one of their best, I guess, role players as well, and one of their best leaders in Luke Hodge, and they're such a young team, you almost kind of think, well, hold on, they're most likely going to at least drop a little bit, but I honestly think they're going to come out and pretty much, do a numbering on Hawthorn, at least actually do pretty decent against them, and I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see. But again, Hawthorn, it's at their home grounds rather, so they should still play pretty decent and could still get the win over Brisbane, and I would assume could actually be the favourite for this game. I'm not exactly too sure, but I do have Brisbane potentially getting the win against Hawthorn. Now, moving on to West Coast versus Melbourne, which is a Sunday game. We have a lot of, a team that Melbourne fans really, really dislike after that one final series. I know it wasn't exactly the greatest thing, but Melbourne are different this year after West Coast pretty much sunk their whole team, and Melbourne, didn't recover from that. I think that they are still a different team. They brought in a couple of really nice inclusions, including they drafted a really nice small forward. They got a wing player in Langdon they were really searching for. They got Tomlinson, who's a wing player that can play back, who I think they desperately needed as well. And, they picked up a couple other interesting drafted players here and there. And they've, taken the captaincy of Viney, which I honestly think will relieve some of his pressure. Like, look what happened with Boak from Port Adelaide. When he lost his captaincy, he was a very good player. And I think Viney was just really young and maybe not ready to potentially have the captaincy, even though it was quite stiff. I honestly think Max Gawn is at that age now where I think he's pretty mature and should do quite a decent job about potentially being the Melbourne captain. And I honestly think it's going to be a bounce-back season for them. Although West Coast have pretty much come in, added Tim Kelly, who's arguably the best young player in the league, and they are set to potentially, have another contending season, and are probably people's favourites to potentially win the premiership. And they're versing a team that just came off not so good of a season in round 1. So that's obviously going to be extremely interesting to see who potentially, can get the win. But I do believe West Coast should get the win against Melbourne quite comfortably. But anyone to thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for the latest AFL content and AFL news. Don't forget to comment in the comment section down below. What are your thoughts and opinions and tips and predictions? And again, sorry if this video does come out and they actually eventually delay the AFL season. I had no control of that. I had no idea that, was going to potentially happen, because obviously, again, we don't really know until the AFL do come out and decide to call it, which is extremely odd. They're doing it one day before the actual, round does start. So, again, I'm all in the dark. I've got literally no idea, but I thought I'd just make this video anyway, just to see how it's really going to go. And again, if it does actually eventually get delayed and round 1 does eventually come, I don't really know if my opinions are going to exactly change too much, so I guess I'd just really keep this video up, and I'd probably do maybe another one of these videos if round 1 did get delayed and all of that type of stuff. But for right now, it is actually on, so I'm extremely interested to see how it's going to potentially go. But as I was saying, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for all the latest, AFL content, whether that's AFL Evolution, tips and predictions, and all that type of stuff. I definitely would really like to know your thoughts and opinions on this all. And don't forget to subscribe to my gaming channel and my IRL/vlogging channel. Links for them are in the description down below. And don't forget to go check out my podcast as well, where I talk about AFL and NBA content and all that type of stuff as well. Links for them are going to be in the description down below. So I was saying, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and comment. And I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
In the mystery of life.